No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
With the second pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Von Miller, linebacker, Texas A&M.
He's the greatest ever, huh?
And then I just wanted
When you got all the advantages, it's easy.
And welcome to Aggie War Pod. You're hearing my voice on the intro this time because my normal co-host Mike Craven had a kid. I guess that's kind of important to take care of that. So I will be joined by Will Stone. Will, welcome to Aggie War Pod. Excited to have you on. Do you want to just kind of introduce yourself to the audience for those that don't know you?
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. And appreciate you having me on. Of course, I'm honored to do it. So, and happy to be here. But yeah, my name is Will Stone, class of 15 from Texas A&M. I've followed this program, this A&M program, on a pretty much daily basis since I was a freshman in 2011. Even followed Jay's recruitment way back when. So that really dates myself there. But I love it so much so that I started my own podcast a couple years ago, and I do that still throughout the season, the Ineligible Pod. So talked to Jay, and he reached out. He's like, "Hey, I need someone to fill in," and I'm very happy to do so. So yeah, glad to be here.
And thanks again, Will, for jumping in here. Excited for spring ball. We have a lot to talk about, but before we jump into the pod, just a reminder that here at Aggie War Pod, a member of the Dave Campbell's Texas Republic of Football Network, we are proud to partner with Home Field. If you're looking for vintage college apparel, or in some cases vintage NASCAR apparel, like this Folgers hat I have on, the audio only listeners won't see that, but I have this great throwback Tim Richmond hat on that is courtesy of Home Field. If you're looking to purchase some vintage college apparel or other apparel, use promo code WHOOP. That's WHOOP. Whoop for 15% off your first purchase. And Will, let's dive into it. We'll start off by talking about 2024.
All right.
It was, I think there was a point in the season where Aggie fans were very excited about the way the season was going. Probably about the LSU game when you had the blackout jerseys. A great point in the season. I think everybody had high hopes, and then it kind of fell off a little bit towards the end. Obviously not the close to the year that Texas A&M fans wanted. What are your overall thoughts on the program after the 2024 season?
Yeah, I think you got that right. I was lucky enough to be at the LSU game, top 5 sporting moments of my life, being able to be there for that. The blackout, the comeback, the way we came back, the energy in that stadium, and what it meant, getting a big win over at the time a top 10-ish opponent, maybe top 15 at worst. So a big deal. You only had the one loss. You had no conference losses. It was all on the table for you. And I think I understand the frustration that our fan base is going through. 100%. I get it. Like, it was a very typical way to end the season for A&M, where you have that hot start. And I think the head coach put it best, because I'm in this conundrum of saying, hey, 8-4 isn't good enough here, but I don't think it was a complete failure of a first season. I think some good things obviously happened, but Coach Elko was on TexAgs a couple weeks ago, and had the same question. He was like, I think it was a step forward, but it was a missed opportunity to take several steps forward. And I think I agree with that wholeheartedly. It is a step in the right direction. I think 2025 is another chance for another step. But man, like, you go back to when you're 7-1 and everything's there for you. You're going to be favored in 3 or 4 games left on your schedule, and then you go walk into a buzzsaw South Carolina. Things don't go well for you. You have the most upsetting loss to me was the Auburn game. I thought that was, and it was 4 overtimes, that sort of thing. It was a very excruciating way to lose, but Texas was just a better team than we were. So obviously that sucked, but I mean, can't really put that on the coaches or anything. But I think it was a step, but I think they've done enough. I think they have to take another step forward in 2025. But 2024, pretty solid start. All things considered, when you look at the whole season, but I would like to see more this coming fall.
Yeah, and you mentioned it with the 7-1 start. Obviously, you have the one loss to Notre Dame, which that aged, I think, pretty well when you consider how the
Yeah,
Irish ended their season. Uh, the loss to South Carolina, I think South Carolina was just peaking at that point. Lenora Sellers, obviously, you had some issues with tackling in that game,
yeah.
but Lenora Sellers is a load to bring down, as was Rocket Sanders, who A&M fans were familiar with from his time at Arkansas before he got to South Carolina.
I think they've got like 5 or 6 guys on defense that are going to get drafted. Like
Yeah,
it was a really good a really good football team.
extremely good at rushing the passer too, which I think the offensive line struggled to protect at times. Obviously, that unit also took a big step forward, and I realized the bar was kind of low for the offensive line improving, but I do think we definitely saw improvement. Uh, But again, like it was a first year head coach, really a first year starter because Connor Wigman, a little bit banged up early on in the season. And then, it felt like uh, Marcel Reed kind of took the reins. Obviously, that LSU game started from that point forward. And Wigman has since moved on to a University of Houston. I think a lot of A&M fans just hope he's healthy and is
Yeah.
able to improve down there. But going back to A&M season, obviously you mentioned the Texas loss, and then you close out the season with another disappointing loss in the bowl game against USC. Hard to read too much into that. Obviously, bowl games are just kind of a little bit of a weird deal, but there are things for A&M to build on. I do think that again, one of the comments that I made about the staff and recruitment for their first year under Elko was that it felt like there was a plan to address issues with the roster. Uh, and I think that was true in the portal during this offseason as well. With that being said, that leads us into roster talk. So, Will, what jumps out to you on the roster? I mean, obviously, when these spring rosters come out, people have a tendency to read into every little bit of weight gained or lost additions, things like that. But is there anything that really jumps out to you from this roster as we head into spring ball?
Yeah, so I think it's a very experienced roster, which we've I think to this level we haven't really had that in terms of like the multiple year returning starters, like the Trey Zunes going into their his fourth year as a starter, and some different guys like that, to where hey, it's not just that you're bringing starters of production back, you're bringing back fourth year guys, fifth year guys. Um, a lot of the teams that you lost to last year had a lot of those kind of guys, those COVID seniors, those sometimes as much as sixth, seventh year seniors that were grown men, and they had them in the right spots, in the trenches. So um, what jumps out to me is looking at Bill Connolly, he's got us pretty high in his returning production numbers, which you would think losing those defensive linemen that you lost, it wouldn't be, but you bring enough back elsewhere. I mean, you still bring back quite a few pressures and sacks from Cassius Howell. I think if I'm looking at who on this team is going to be a preseason All SEC guy, I think Cassius Howell's at the top of my list. Him and Trey Zune, because Trey Zune was last year. He was postseason All SEC, which is what you want to be. So,
Yeah.
but I think Howell, I think he was your most productive guy on a per snap basis when it comes to rushing the passer. You hate to lose guys as talented as Stewart and Scorton and Shamar Turner, but I think he's a great piece to have there. I think he's set for a big year. The offensive line, to me, I think, you know, it's not just that you bring back your top guys and your starters, but you played 12 and a half games last year without your starting center, without Mark Naboo. And to hear Elko say he's ready to go for practice, I think that's huge. I didn't know what his injury was. I assumed ACL. I don't know why I assumed that. I just did because he missed the whole season, and then it was lower leg, I think. But seems like he's ready to go for spring, which I think that's a big deal. Um, and then you have a healthy Chase Pasantes. He got banged up about mid-season, and I don't think he played, but he wasn't 100% by any means there down the stretch. So I think that, along with guys that I really like Trey Zune, Armaje Reed Adams, and even Demetrius Crownover, being a full-time starter last season and coming back. I think there's a lot to like in that group. I think this team still wants to run the football, and they can. And then I look at receiver where I think they've really upped things from a floor standpoint and a ceiling standpoint. I think getting Casey Concepcion from NC State, that's a huge get. I try not to make this comparison too much, but to me, he's a bigger, faster Aeneas, and I love Aeneas. Like he's a number one in my heart forever. But I think Concepcion, like he can be used in that kind of way. I think Mario Craver from Mississippi State is a big time get, and some of the younger guys as well. Terry Bussey, uh, being full time receiver per Mike Elko the other day on the press conference. That's where you need to see a big step, because I've got a lot of faith in Marcel as a quarterback. I don't have any issues with how he throws the ball, his accuracy and things like that. I think he can, take another step and be better. But can you take the pressure off of him by running the ball, protecting, especially on the interior, not giving up free runners up the middle, and then have some guys that can really make plays for you in the passing game?
Yeah, and you talked about the experience and the returners, especially on the offensive line. One of the things that I think people maybe take for granted at times is just how important continuity is. At that position in particular, you mentioned Mark Naboo being out injured, but now you have him back, and then you have Zune, who is another fantastic player, Majah Reed Adams, who was a great addition last year. You mentioned Crownover, Basantis. Like having these guys get another year together, I think makes a load of difference for the confidence of both them and the quarterback behind them. And I do think this offense is going to be improved this year. Obviously, some changes are probably going to be made in the offseason. Uh, I think the offense was one of the bigger concerns going into this offseason. Like we said, the recruitment felt like it had a plan. I do wonder about rushing the passer on the defense with the loss of Stewart and Scorton. I think maybe there wasn't as much production as some A&M fans had hoped for from that position. But the guy that you mentioned and Cassius Howell, I think is returning and what he's able to do rushing the passer flashed at times throughout last season. There's some other guys on the roster that you look at that I think have the ability to get after the passer. Rylan Kennedy is a guy that I definitely have an eye on to
Oh
kind of
yeah.
fill that void. You look at the linebacker position and Torian York. I think, obviously he is kind of a heart and soul of this defense in a lot of ways, just a leader on the field. Played a huge role in that comeback win against LSU that we talked about.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to just see how this roster kind of comes together. See exactly who steps up, and that's what we're going to talk about for this next part here. Is I want to hear one guy in particular that you're looking forward to seeing in spring from a newcomer perspective, and then from a returning starter, or not even necessarily starter, but returning guy on the roster perspective. So one of each. Will, who you got?
Yeah, so it's really tough to pick one, and yeah, I think typically in spring practice, I tend to gravitate towards the second year players who didn't get a lot of playing time but have some kind of buzz around them. I'm going to cop out a little bit and give you one on each side, just really quickly. I think Solomon Williams, at defensive end, to go off what you were saying about rushing the passer. I think it's interesting that we've gotten used to having these big defensive ends. Like a Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner played end all of 2023 at 280 pounds. So Elko seems to be getting away from that in the players he's recruiting and bringing in through the portal. So I think they went and got some veteran guys to help out at that spot with Dayon Hayes, TJ Searcy, and the kid from Georgia, Samuel Impemba. And I think there's some ability there, but I think Solomon Williams was a real find and a real hidden gem in the previous recruiting class. True freshman last year, popped a little bit in the bowl game. I think he's a guy to watch to take a big step forward. And if you're going to have a good pass rushing unit, or as good or as better or better than you had last year, I think Williams can be a big piece of that. My other guy is Ashton Bethel Roman on offense. Um, kind of under the radar a little bit with the other additions through the transfer portal, but he's a guy that I've really got my eye on. And then newcomers, um, I would want to say Jerome Miles, but he's of all the freshmen, like they're all here except for him, which I mean that's totally fair and makes sense to rehab that knee. I think he's trying to run track, so that's encouraging to hear about his rehab. But um, I think newcomer, I'm gonna go with Tyler Onyedim. I may have butchered his last name. I think I know Elko said his name. I'm trying to say it how Elko said it because I haven't looked at the roster yet to get the pronunciation. But the defensive tackle from Iowa State. I think that's a huge get losing Shamar Turner and Rodas Johnson as well, who played and had some nice snaps as well. So to go along with Hicks and Regis, who I think very highly of. I think Tyler Onyedem could be a really impact player. Probably more of a three tech, but I think he can play the run and the pass pretty well.
Yeah, great picks. So I'm going to start off with the newcomer side of the ball, or side of things. And you talked about a little bit about him when we were looking at the roster, but Casey Concepcion from NC State, the transfer at wide receiver. I think wide receiver was a place that a lot of A&M fans wanted to see action in the portal, and I think he was one of the biggest additions that A&M had at the position. I think he's going to be a big weapon for this offense coming in. Really interested to see his role and see if he's able to kind of take over in games. Expecting him to be a massive splash, and I'm sticking with the offense for my returning player, a guy that we all had a high expectations last year, but suffered an injury in fall camp is Ruben Owens. And we saw him back towards the end of last season, but not really close to 100%. He's a guy that I think, if you pair him up with Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels, that trio of running backs, if they're all healthy, I think you have a real monster in the backfield. And Ruben Owens is a guy, I think if he's at 100%, is probably the biggest playmaker of the three in my mind. So I'm really interested to see how he responds this spring, getting back to full health, and can't wait to see it. I guess if I have to give, I should probably talk about some of the guys on the defense as a defensive guy myself. You kind of took the Onyedem pick from me there. Julian Humphrey is a guy that I'm interested in seeing. Obviously
Yeah,
transfers in from Georgia, a guy that maybe didn't have the best tenure there, but was still able to earn a starting role at points on that Georgia defense, which is a statement in itself. And then another guy, just getting Tyreek Chappelle back healthy. I think that's going to
yeah.
be a major key for this defense at the in the back end, which struggled at times, and I'm interested to see how he gets on now that he's back healthy. Definitely a couple guys to watch there. But yeah, just glad to have action back on the gridiron again.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to seeing how these guys perform during this spring practice, and at the end of this spring practice session, we do get the spring game. Some programs have started moving away from the spring game. Obviously, A&M is still having theirs. What's your take on the spring game? Are you a fan of it? Maybe think it's kind of overblown. There's no real reason to have it. What side of the fence do you fall on? Well,
Yeah, so I think this is one of those topics that comes around in college football that I tend to like just not enjoy the discourse on. But I mean, like it's something we should talk about, because it is out there. But I remember like the discussion on like satellite camps like 10 years ago. I'm like, this is all so dumb. Like, who cares? But spring games, I think if you like, I get the part that I understand is the injury risk. I mean, a couple years ago we had a corner. Like he was a reserve guy, but Joshua Moten made a play in the end zone and his knee hit a camera stand and tore his ACL, in a spring game, and that's very unfortunate. And injuries like that, can happen. Football's a dangerous game. So I get that aspect, but I've always been jealous of the teams like Oklahoma and Nebraska who can get 90,000 for their spring game. I don't see any reason why A&M can't market that and make that into a bigger deal than it has been. And if not, like I if you want to do away with it or something like that, Elko sounds like he wants to, keep doing a spring game. Um, but I think if you were to get rid of it, I think you have to have like you have to throw the fan base some sort of bone. Like there's so many people that love this program and support the program and want, not VIP access, but like they just want to see the team and get their eyes on them and have something to watch and do during the springtime besides baseball, basketball, and all the other fine sports, softball here at A&M. But like should you have one, should you not? If your reasoning is injuries, that I understand. If it's something else, if it's like we don't want to show other people our players, like other teams, I'm not real big on that.
Yeah, for me, the spring game. So I never actually went through spring practice. I was always injured. I always had shoulder surgery at the end of football season, so I didn't really go through a spring practice. But for me, I've always felt like the spring game is really more of an event for the fans than it matters to the players. Because at the end of the day, what it is just a glorified scrimmage,
Mhm.
and you'll have usually a couple of those during the spring session, anyways, and then you'll have usually a couple during fall camp. And the only difference is this one is in front of a bunch of fans. People are able to build events around it. So I don't really care one way or the other whether there's a spring game or not. I just think it's kind of a cool opportunity to maybe get some alumni in. Like I love the alumni flag football game that they usually do
Yeah,
during the spring game. I think that's a cool event. I agree with you. Like I do think there's a way that you could probably market this and make it a little bit more of a spectacle. I think you lean into the more fun side of it. Like don't make it all about the action on the field. Obviously, it's a great chance for fans to come and see the players, see the new additions, especially. But I don't think you need to get too into it. I think it's just really about making it an enjoyable experience for the family. So if you don't want to have a spring game because you're worried about injuries, I don't blame you. If you do want to have a spring game, just have some fun with it. That's always
yeah,
been my take on it. Uh, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Like I still am excited that we get to have some extra film on this A&M roster, thanks to
right.
this game. So selfishly, that part is nice. And then, well, moving on to the last little segment of the show that we have, you got a text from a buddy that he wanted us to power rank cuts of meat.
Yeah.
How do you want to approach this? Are we talking like one animal? Are we talking like what are our favorite kinds of meat? I'm assuming this is going to be a barbecue thing, so I'm going at this with a barbecue mindset.
Yeah, so uh I didn't even think about other animals. Like I just strictly was thinking about beef. So he may have meant other like, like pork and sausage and whatever like whatever else. But my mind was on beef. Um and I feel like it's a cop out for me to say what I think is number one, but it's got to be ribeye, right? I mean like in terms of quality and just like uh I mean, not just from an economic standpoint of, hey, it costs the most. Like it's literally more expensive than everything else about like from a cow, but except for maybe, like Wagyu or whatever else, which I'm not even sure what cuts are
Wagyu's
Wagyu.
the breed of cow.
Yeah, yeah. Super marbled, that sort of thing. Um, but I feel like after that there's just a huge gap and like there's kind of this other tier of like there's like T-bone, there's like tomahawk, like all the other fatty cuts, and then I like sirloin just fine. I'd put sirloin beneath all those other good ones, but um and I feel like brisket is not fair to judge because like it's obviously amazing, but it's
It's
just
a
a
different
different type.
process. You
Yeah.
like to
Yeah.
get the best performance out of brisket, you really have to approach it differently. Same thing with like a beef rib. I think you just have to kind of like approach it differently, and then you get into short ribs. Like, are you gonna braise a short rib? Like, there's a bunch of different ways to approach this. That's why it's so hard to rank meats. Some of the hidden gems, I think you get like a shoulder clod that you can do kind of brisket style, which is a cheaper cut of meat, a cheaper cut similar to brisket that I think is good. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can play around with just on a cow, and that, like you said, that's not even getting into the other cuts of meat or other types of meat. Like
Yeah.
pork. You can get into the sausages, to the poultry products like turkey versus chicken. There's a lot of things that you can play around with when it comes to meat discussions, especially if a smoker's involved.
Oh yeah, yeah. In terms of tri-tip, do you have an opinion on tri-tip? Is that something you've experienced with?
So my fiance's dad does live out in California. I got to experience tri-tip at a barbecue joint out there, Heritage Barbecue, in God, I can't remember the name of the town. A small town there on the ocean. Beautiful scenery, by the way. The weather, incredible out there on the Pacific. But yeah, tri-tip was great. Uh, I'm going to get off topic here, getting out of the meats for a
Oh,
second.
go for it.
I will say chimichurri as a condiment paired with tri-tip. Chimichurri is an elite condiment. I think
Yeah.
people need to put some more respect on chimichurri when it comes to the condiment game.
One of the best steaks I've had in a restaurant was I think the place closed down, unfortunately. It was a diner bar in Austin, and they served their ribeye with chimichurri and fries, and it was amazing. Just an amazing meal all around. And I'm like, I need to start doing this more often. Like
Yeah.
this is a really good
And the thing about
combination.
chimichurri is like it's pretty easy to make. You just got to get some herbs, some olive oil, a little salt, maybe some pepper flakes if you're into that. Me personally, I like to add a little red pepper flakes to my chimichurri, but no, it's just a great condiment and it goes on just about any cut of meat you could want.
Yeah, for sure. Um,
Uh,
to
be, Go ahead.
close this conversation a little bit, unless there's more we want to get to about the fine meats out there. What's the next stop? And obviously, like no free ads or whatever, but like what's the next barbecue stop for Jay Arnold in 2025?
Man, so I got to go back up to see my buddy Cooper Abercrombie at Bar A Barbecue. I was gonna go for their 1 year celebration, and then I got credentialed for the NASCAR race in Austin that same weekend, and I was like, well, duty calls. So
Right.
I owe him a trip up there to go see those guys. They do great work. Uh, we'll have the we'll have the uh, big festival in Aggieland for Troubadour Fest in May. So I'll
Yeah.
be up there with LJ's and that crew slinging meats. That'll be a good time. Uh, but yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of barbecue stops. The new Texas Monthly Top 50 list comes out later this year, so keep an eye out for that. It'll definitely be. I feel like this is the most competitive it's been. There's just so many good joints nowadays.
Like there's like and I haven't read the list extensively, but I feel like there's places that used to be in the top 10 that are just like kind of in the middle of the pack now because there's just so many new spots and new like very, very high quality spots popping up. I got to go to Interstellar when it was like a little, place in a strip mall that no one even knew about. I tried to go there a couple weekends ago, line around the block. I'm like, well, glad I went there once because I don't know if I'll get to go again. But, I've heard so much about Truth. I've been trying to get down there to Houston and try Truth. I guess I technically had it at the Houston Rodeo last week, but that's not the real thing. So
Yeah, it's not the
I
same.
want to like go to the spot and order me, uh, like three meats and a couple sides, something like that.
Oh yeah, gotta have some sides with it. But yeah, I mean it's gonna be a great summer for barbecue. Get out and support your local joints. But that wraps up this episode, Will. Thanks again for filling in. We'll
Yeah.
have these going weekly moving forward. Things to talk about around spring ball, just notes that we've seen on practice online, and news as it comes. For all of you that enjoy the Aggie War Pod, thank you for listening. We appreciate your support. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Share. Word of mouth is the greatest way to get this podcast out. Give us those 5 stars, all the things that help us grow as a podcast. And if you're interested in sponsoring Aggie War Pod, feel free to reach out to me. Man, it's so good to be talking about football again, Will. So good.
Absolutely.
Until next time, we appreciate y'all.